Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with ageing potential.
Ginny Poval had a successful career as an insurance industry executive in America before she bought a flower farm called Protea Heights in South Africa that changed her life. Now the owner of a 5-hectare vineyard and an award-winning wine brand, she's done things the hard way. Listen to us chat about kite surfing, old vine Chenin Blanc, vegan compost, the terroir of the Devon Valley, and why painting and drawing are the best forms of relaxation. Hello, Ginny. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Good evening.
Good evening for you. Yeah, well, good evening for both of us. You've had quite a week, haven't you?
I did. I overthink a lot of things, and this week I was canning wine for the first time ever. So, and I had all sorts of construction workers here, and they're installing a new solar plant, and all happening at the same time. So, yeah.
And now you got to do a podcast with me, right?
Yeah. And I haven't even had a glass of wine yet tonight. So, yeah.
Good. That's good to hear. Listen, I mean, as people can hear from your accent, which you haven't lost, you grew up in the States, Boston, I think, in a working class family. Was wine part of your life as a kid?
Never. My even tonight when I spoke to my 97-year-old dad, he was he's always concerned that I'm like drinking too much. If you have one glass of wine, you're drinking too much. So no, there wasn't any wine in my house. And they weren't foodies either. Just basic food. My mom wasn't a very good cook. So yeah. Boring kind of.
So no early inspiration, basically.
No, not until my first love was a musician, and he ended up working in restaurants to support himself. And so he turned out to be a master chef. And that's really, that was the beginning of my world of food and wine.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. You left school at 16. You went to a junior college to learn secretarial skills, which I'm sure have been very useful. But your real passion was art, wasn't it? And did you think about going to university or art school?
Art school, I definitely wanted to go. But my mom and my dad both were very, you have to have a job. You have to make money. And you can't make money in art. So that just kind of fell by the wayside. And I decided to figure out a way to get out of the house. And I found a junior college that would accept me as a freshman without finishing high school. So I had to convince the principal of the high school to allow me to go to college. And he said, well, yeah, sure, as long as we can take your freshman English as your senior English, and then you can graduate. So that's what I did.
And you did? How long did that take?
I only stayed in school for 2 years, and then I wasn't really applying myself. I was just partying, and yeah. So I got a job as a secretary. First job was at GTE Sylvania in the Minuteman missile system, manufacturing Minuteman missile, the systems, the big cabinets that went underground. And that was the start of it. And then I fell into a job in insurance. And that's when I really realized I could apply myself and go somewhere. And that's what I did. Worked hard.
And you were incredibly successful. You ended up as COO, overseeing 40 consultants in a business with revenues of 16 million quid. Did you enjoy that world?
I did.
$60 million, not quid.
Well, I worked really hard, and I think it was also the time. It was just the time of that era that you could. I didn't have a college degree, and you could just apply yourself and do well. And then I realized that I wasn't really getting paid the same as the guys that I was working with. So then I tried to move into sales. Consulting, so that you were billable hours. And as long as you kept generating revenue, they had to pay you. They couldn't ignore it. So that's kind of how I worked around it. And then, then I took a job with this consulting practice in New York City. And I was lucky enough to, I'm sorry, Tim, my cat. I was lucky enough to be part of the organization when he decided to sell, and we didn't have non-competes. So the company that bought us kind of had to give us an earn-out deal. And that's kind of how I came up with the money to buy a farm in Africa.
I mean, tell us about that in a minute. I just wonder what that period of your life taught you in a sense that's been useful.
Teamwork, trust, being true to your word. If you promise somebody something, you have to make good on it. Kind of old-fashioned concepts that I don't think exist the same way now. But back then, it was handshakes, but it was also people could rely on you. If you told them they were going to do something, you would, do it. And being a good problem solver, not being afraid of the unknown, because most of the time I was thrown into things that I had no clue on how to sort out or come up with some plans so that you could convince a company to pay you money to work with them. You had to be creative about all those things. So, I don't know. Must have been good at it.
I think you're being very modest. You're obviously very good at it. But I mean, tell us about your exposure to fine wine, because that came through a boyfriend, didn't it? I think he was what, a professional sailor?
Sailor, yes. And,
sounds glamorous. Wow, man.
I think that was the attraction. He was on these really big yachts and, a lot of very wealthy clients. And he was a very good sailor, and he helped them win races. So, yeah, that was kind of my exposure to, because I think up until that point, I was just drinking Beck's beer. I wasn't drinking fine wine at all. And he had one, I remember one client in particular, he was a veterinarian, and he had this amazing townhouse in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. And he had this incredible selection of Bordeauxs. So that was really my first exposure there. And then another one of his clients was into Barolos and Brunellos. And so, they were all really big wines, though. I don't think I was really fell into Burgundy or Pinot Noir for a long time after that.
And these were on the boat, were they? You were having them on the boat, right?
No, we would go to the yacht club because, they would have their own personal locker with their wines, and you could drink it dark and stormy, or, you could go and drink some fine Bordeaux. So that's, I'd rather drink the wine than the dark and stormy. So,
and was there a eureka moment? Any wine you remember, you thought, oh shit, I didn't know wine could taste that good?
No. There were 1980s, early 80s Bordeauxs. I don't think at that point I was really recognizing names. I don't think it really got to. I think I did a vertical tasting at at one event. Someone had brought some Italian. I should have actually done better on my memory, because you gave me gave me some idea of what we were talking about. But no, I can't remember the names.
Bordeaux, anyway, that kind of thing, really.
Bordeaux,
yeah, and you had
Bordeaux is really what I was fixated on for a long time.
And, you had your own expense account too. So you were drinking good stuff. And as you said, the consulting company you worked for was sold, yeah? And did that free you up financially with the amount of money it gave you? We don't have to tell us how much they gave you, but did you suddenly think, hey, I can do something with this?
Yeah, for sure. And that's really, and I was stuck there for 4 years. I had to stay there 4 years in order to get the earn out. So in that 4 years, I had time to think about what I really wanted to do. And it was to have a farm. It was just to get away from New York, have nothing to do with people, and just have a farm and have vineyards. In my mind, it was going to be vineyards. And at no point did I think I was making wine, ever.
You were going to sell the grapes, were you? You're going to sell the grapes, right?
Going to be, yeah. I was just going to have, the finest grapes and yes, making lots of money from being a farmer. Haha. That was
Little did you know. And you started studying viticulture a bit, didn't you? Did a few courses at UC Davis?
Yeah, I would. UC Davis is pretty cool because they would have back-to-back weekend courses. So one weekend, it was a 2-part series, back-to-back weekends, not thinking that people would actually fly out there for the week. But that's what I was doing. And they had a 3-week, they still do. They still have all these courses. They're amazing. And really great teachers. And they pull people in from industry. And so you're not getting just the theoretical, you're getting some more practical perspective. I think the 3-week marketing course was really worth it. It really made me think about how would you sell wine? And again, how little did I know how difficult it is to sell wine. But yeah. But
and where did you think of buying a farm? Where did you look at?
Believe it or not, I actually looked in Argentina because I fell in love with Argentina on one of our trips. And I thought, but, Spanish, and I just didn't see myself fitting into the culture there at all. I just couldn't envision it. But I love the country. I love the people there. I love the beauty. It's just an amazing place. Santa Barbara, a little bit. I looked a bit there, but again, it was too expensive. This was back in, before the financial crisis, where real estate prices were crazy. And there was no way I could afford like a premium property, maybe an acre or two.
But it was definitely grapes you were thinking of growing. It wasn't, strawberries
definitely.
or avocados or,
Exactly. No, it was grapes. Yeah.
So were those courses at UC Davis, were they useful? I mean, in terms of what you've subsequently done, I mean, do you look back at that and say, hey, I really learned something on that course?
Yes and no. I think applying it here in South Africa, it didn't really, all the information I learned about rootstock was worthless here. There isn't even close to the amount of different rootstocks here and clones. It's just different. Soils are different. Weather's different. I mean, there's similarities, but it was a good starting point.
And what took you to South Africa for the first time? I think it was 2005 you first went there, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was a kite surfing. All of the vacations I took with my partner were always sports related, sailing, bicycling. We had to have an activity. So it was kite surfing when we came here. But at that point, I wasn't really into kite surfing. Windsurfing was kind of going like not as popular. And so when we got here, I realized it was just really, I'm not going to windsurf. So he was just kite surfing the whole time. And I went off and explored the winelands. So I was like, oh my God, it's close to the ocean and there's vineyards and it's most beautiful place. And I just felt the energy here. It was changing, it felt like this is a place to be. I had a whole lot of positive energy then.
I mean, did you know much about the place before you went there?
I kept coming back on vacation and I realized this is really ridiculous. I have to come here for, 3 months. So I decided to see if I could find someone that would allow me to do harvest. And and I was like, shit, who's going to do that? Because I'm 50 at the time. And who's going to, I'm not going to be able to do the same kind of grunt work, but maybe someone will take me in. So I just randomly sent emails out and never mentioned my age. And Neil Morehouse from Zorgfleet said, sure, show up on the 21st of Jan and we'll find something for you to do.
So you
and
did.
It was, I did, yeah.
And so you learned a lot from him, didn't you?
I did. He's a very different, different than a lot of the other winemakers that I've had exposure to now. And I'm probably lucky that it was him because he was really super encouraging. He's a very positive person. If you screw something up, it's never a mistake. It's a learning experience. And he was telling me how you would correct it or what to think about for the next time. And yeah, it was really positive. He could never say anything negative to anyone. That's the kind of person he is.
So 2005, 2008, you'd come back and you finally did a vintage in 2008, stayed 3 months. How did you come to buy Protea Heights, which is where you are now? Lovely name, by the way.
I was like, on the weekends when I would have a little bit of time, I would just, spend an hour or two with a real estate agent. And they would show me these vineyards and they were, I don't know, I just wasn't inspired by anything that they were showing me. And towards the end, I was thinking, it's just not going to happen. This is just a pipe dream. And then this guy that quite a character says, you know what, I have an idea. Why don't we look at something that doesn't have any vineyards? Let's just see if you can find happiness in this farm because I think you're going to like it. So we drove in here. And as soon as we drove in, I was just taken by the trees. There were trees everywhere. It was an arboretum. It was just spectacular. And the views. But the negative was that it had a guest house. And in my wildest dreams, I would never want a hospitality venture. I'm not an extrovert. And so that was really the thing that kept me from saying yes on the spot. So, anyways, he left me and I kind of stayed here and I drove around the farm and then I went down the end of the driveway and I sat in the car and I'm like, you know what, if I don't buy this farm, I'm never doing it. So I phoned him up and I said, let's make an offer. And that's how quick it was. It was just instantaneous. Wow. So then by July 1, I owned it. That was mid-April. And by July 1, I owned it. It was that quick.
Wow. So in sort of 2.5 months, you were in, right?
Yeah.
With a guest house and a flower farm, right? But no vineyards.
And with a brand new farm manager, because the farm manager that was here was a raging alcoholic. So I had to find a new farm manager. So I was lucky enough that Stefan, who owned the Zorg fleet, knew Francois, my farm manager, because he worked at Lormerans under Rosa Kruger. So I stole him from Rosa. So
has she forgiven you? No. So how did you go about setting yourself up as a wine producer? You're in your early 50s, yeah. Were you accepted immediately as an American woman from outside?
I think so. I mean, I never knew if anybody wasn't accepting me. Nobody told me, or I didn't get the vibe. Everybody was really helpful here. Everyone. I think I can't imagine doing this in California. I mean, there's no way. I don't think that people would be as open, but I could be wrong. But I was an oddity on some level. But
did you talk to Samantha O'Keefe, who was at Lismore, another American? No, were you aware that she was in South Africa?
Yes, I was aware because people tell you, "Oh, there's another American," or "There's Andrea."
3 Americans, yeah, 3 American women, yeah.
And actually, Black Pearl, Mary, another American. So yeah, I mean, you hear of. Everyone always tells you, "Oh, do you know so and so?" Because they're American, you're supposed to know them, but it doesn't always.
You don't. No, it doesn't. And so you got this beautiful property with lots of flowers on it and trees, but no vineyards. How did you decide which wine styles you wanted to make, and where did you go about getting grapes from at the start?
Well, Francois, by the way, who knew nothing about horticulture, only knew viticulture, was also overwhelmed. And by the way, he didn't really speak English that well. So in the very beginning, there was always a period of where we would speak English, and then whoever was here would speak Afrikaans to bring him up to speed. That's how we started. And now his children are like, their best subject in school is English. No, we hired VinPro as the consultant to help us to do the soil analysis, to figure, digging pits and figuring out what we should do where. In my mind, we were in Stellenbosch and we were going to do Bordeaux varieties. If we were in Hemel-Arda, I'm sure I would be doing Pinot, which I wish I could have found a property in Hemel-Arda, but I didn't. But so I'm doing Bordeaux because that's where we are.
And in the meantime, while you waited for those grapes to, obviously the vineyards to bed in, as it were, you started buying grapes from other people, didn't you? What did you start out buying?
Well, that was just the best thing that ever happened to me, because it was really Johan Viljoen, who is the Vinbro consultant, who used to work for the cooperative up in up by Hank Lang, up by Glen William.
Citrusdale Mountain, up there, up the west coast.
Yeah. And I just casually said to him, it would be great if I could find some really unique old Chenin somewhere. And he said, "Oh, I know where it is." And we drove up there. And the drive up there, I was like, it's too hot here. Where are we going? And then we drive up to Hank's farm, and it looked like Utah to me, rock formations, dry, who would even figure out that they would want to have a farm here? It's just so barren and so far out of the way. And then there's all of these old bush vine vineyards. And Hank couldn't understand what this American woman wanted with his grapes, because as far as he was concerned, it was just all garbage. He wanted to rip them all out. Yes, he was ripping them out. That's actually why Johan brought me up there, was to try to convince him to keep them, and that someone would actually give him decent money for them. So that's how it started. I think the first I paid him 4,000 rand a ton for the first year, just to see if you could make a decent wine. And so what happens? I get a 5-star platter for the first wine, for the first frickin' wine I'm even involved in making from Hank's grapes. So I went back and said, "Okay, Hank, I think I should give you more for the grapes, because it's proven they're great." But yeah, that's been a whole interesting journey of Afrikaner farmer culture for me, for sure.
Understanding it, really.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it was very sad when he passed away. Was it last year or the year before? It was 2 years ago now, isn't it? Hank passed away.
2 years ago now, yeah. Almost 2 years, yeah.
And you were one of the last people to see him alive, weren't you?
Oh, I think it was 2 or 3 days earlier that we were there harvesting. And then it was just such a shock. But he was stressing that day that I saw him over his rooibos tea. And he sells this tea to like a cooperative, and he sells organic tea. And they had found residue of herbicides. And he was completely freaked out, because there's no way that he had herbicides on the farm. And anyways, he was accusing the cooperative of mixing his tea with somebody else's.
And he was stressed out about that and had a heart attack. Very sad. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what happened. His wife, Serene, thinks it was the vaccine related because he had issues with clotting after the vaccine. But yeah.
I mean, but the wine lives on, doesn't it? That you made, which is the Mary Delaney Collection Chenin Blanc, amazing wine. Just tell us a little bit about the different ranges you've got, because you've got Mary Delaney Collection, you've got the Big Flower, and you've got Flower Girl. I mean, again, this link with flowers, obviously, and we'll talk a bit more about flowers because this was a flower farm, but also you still grow flowers, don't you? So it's a big part. It's a bit of business. Yeah. Yes. Tell us about the three ranges. What's in the ranges?
Well, I started out with Mary Delaney really thinking that it was always going to be the range from grapes that I buy in, because I wanted to separate what I was doing here on the farm, because I was trying to farm organically and sustainably and, no-till and, to differentiate what I was doing, because it's, and how I pay my people. And I don't know, maybe that was a mistake, but so Big Flower range was born, and that's all the Bordeaux varieties. And then there's Flower Girl, which is just the fact that I had done some pet nuts, and I grafted Albarino onto Cabernet, and like, how am I going to put Albarino into this Bordeaux thing? So I just said, okay, you know what? Flower Girl's experimental. Maybe sometimes it'll be a once-off, like I do a vermouth. I may or may not continue that, but fun stuff.
And the vermouth is made from what, Viognier skins, isn't it, or something crazy like that?
Yeah. Yes, with teas, all sorts of delicious, matcha tea, green tea, rooibos tea, and grapefruit. Yeah. It's delicious.
And how many different wines do you make now? Does it depend a bit on the vintage? I mean, you've got some stables, haven't you, or staples, not stables, staples.
I would say it's like 9 wines.
9, yeah. And apart from your own vineyards, which are in Devon Valley, and tell us a bit more about that in a second, where do you source the grapes from? You've got Henk's grapes, or what were Henk's grapes, now taken over by his family, so owns them, right?
And that's it. That's literally, Tim, what I've decided to do is I've stopped. I've got this great farm. I feel like I'm making good wine from it now. Mm-hmm. I understand it more, and I think I want to focus my energy on what I'm doing. And then I'm taking in Hank's grapes, and that's it. So
the Pinot you're going to stop doing, are you?
The Pinot is going to become my Pinot. So the 2022 Pinot that I think you last tasted was 100% from the farm. And I'm going to keep it that way, because I think it tastes pretty good. So I don't think you have to have Hemelanarda fruit necessarily to make good Pinot.
Just tell us a little bit where you are. You are in Devon Valley. Just tell us where that sits within Stellenbosch and what makes it special.
I think the weather. I think it's special because of the weather, because the valley faces southeast, so the southeaster blows right down the valley, and so by 3 p.m, 3:30, you've definitely got a breeze every day, so it cools everything down. You've got a nice diurnal shift between hot or day and night. The soils here are perfect for Merlot, and I think other people have proven that. People that are buying in fruit. I know Rustenburg loves my Merlot. They buy a lot.
And the soils are what, clay based, are they? Is that why?
Clay. Yeah, clay soils, and some of them are more sandstone. Some are decomposed granite. It's kind of 8 different, which is hard for me to understand, but there's 5 or 8 different soil types here on a 21-hectare farm, which is one side of Devon Valley is granite, and the other side is more of the sandstone soils. So,
and you've planted 21 hectares of vineyards, have you?
No. I only have 5 hectares of vineyards and 8 hectares of flowers, and I have 5 hectares of trees.
And the guest house, right?
Garden and a guest house in the middle of all those trees.
Tell us a bit about the way you farm. I mean, I like your description of the property as one big garden, or you said of arboretum. I mean, it's interesting the way you farm because you have quite dense planting, don't you, in terms of the number of vines per hectares. You leave beautiful cover crops. I mean, your vineyards look beautiful; they really do.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's. I approach it from maybe because I used to do a lot of gardening. I used to find solace in just digging around in the soil and planting things. But that's, I guess, the way I approached it. Where my farm manager, approached it in the beginning more like a factory. It felt more manufacturing or factory because it's large and you have to get stuff done. So I think over the years, he's appreciated my perspective on it and the cover crops and, building back topsoil. That's one thing I've never really understood here is how old these soils are. And there's not much of topsoil, which I think the Northern Hemisphere is more used to topsoil, a layer of debris. So that's kind of how that whole cover crop thing started with me. And then I started reading more and more about no-till and understanding, hey, there's a whole lot going on there. So it was my fixation on building topsoil and all that created the no-till.
And was no-till also because of climate change and just these warmer vintages we're getting, particularly that run of dry vintages? Yeah,
I think me realizing that we had to have debris and cover the soil, and because it was so hot, and a lot of the soil just never stays moist, and then experimenting with all sorts of different mulches. I brought in a special mulching machine from Pennsylvania because you couldn't find anything here to do it. Because we used to have a sawmill down the end of the road. So we would buy all of their chips and then we put it into this machine and we drive it through and we dump all of these chips in the vine row. And so I was obsessed with keeping the soils covered and trying to build back. And I did we've done testing over the years about how much carbon we've added to the soil from doing all of this no-till. And it's very, it's really only the blocks where we keep applying compost that we get the soil, our carbon numbers to increase. They don't increase that dramatically. So
yeah, so you need cover crops and you need the mulching and you need
you need all
the
of
manure,
those
but
things.
you've got to feed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have manure here. We do. We have vegan compost. We don't have
vegan
animals.
compost. I just wonder what advice you'd give to somebody, who's contemplating doing what you're doing. There may be people listening to this and saying, hey, I've got a bit of money, I've just turned 50. I quite fancy owning a wine farm. What do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
I wish I had I think it's really hard to do. I wouldn't do it if you're on your own. I think you need like a husband or a wife or a partner. It's really hard doing it by yourself. I happen to be fortunate in that, if I didn't have Francois, I don't actually know how I would have done it because he's just such a great guy and he views the property as his own property. But if I had any other person, I think I would have given up, I think.
Well, you've got the cat, though, as we can hear. The cat.
I am so sorry about this cat. I'm throwing her outside, actually. I swear to God, she just must have known that, I'm not paying attention to her.
That's what cats do, I'm afraid, yeah. Anyway, next question. I mean, South Africa, we both agree, is a wonderful place and we both love it. There are many things about it. It's got a whole heap of problems, right?
Yeah.
Some of that's impacted on you a bit because you've had sort of camps near you, sort of these informal settlements that have been set up. I just wonder, what would improve the conditions of the majority of its population? If you were Cyril Ramaphosa for a day, what would you do? How do we make South Africa better in a sense?
Well, right off the top, I mean, the reason it's happening is because there's no jobs. I think the official unemployment rate is 32%, but there has to be 60% of the people not working here. But what I would do is that I don't think there's a strong enough focus on the education system here. They only mandatory to go to school until 10th grade. And they have to pay school fees. And they can get reimbursed if they go and stand in line somewhere, if they show that they don't earn enough. The whole system, it should be free to everyone. There should be more integration. I think the separation of the schools, of kids that speak Afrikaans and kids that speak English is wrong. I think they should come together and go to school together. I think the schools are where they need to spend the effort.
Yeah, I think you're right. That all these things begin with education, and that takes time, doesn't it? You can't educate somebody in 10 minutes. It's 10, 15, 20 years really of work. Yeah, no, I agree.
And more after school options, because everyone relies upon the informal childcare system. I know from my housekeepers, their kids go to school, and then there has to be someone at home to take care of the kids. And that's usually a relative or an auntie or, someone. But it seems so simple to have another hour of after school sports or something. There's just not a lot of that here. Not what I remember is when I went to school. That's all.
No, exactly. Just tell us quickly about the guest house, because it's a lovely place to stay. I've never stayed there, but I've tasted there with you, and I've seen how beautiful it is. You didn't want to do a guest house, but you got the guest house. You've made a real success of it. Have you ended up enjoying it?
It's funny. I enjoyed it during COVID the most because there were less
no one
guests,
there.
obviously. But no, but I actually had to be the guest house manager because I had to let everyone go except the housekeepers. I kept the housekeepers because without the housekeepers, you don't have a guest house. So yeah, bit by bit, it started to come back, and I acted as the guest house manager and that's when I really realized all the things we were doing wrong. Because up until that point, I just hired someone and said, here, you just deal with it. I don't want anything to do with it. I pay the bills, and I'm just going to assume that you're going to run it properly. But I just saw all the things that were wrong, and I hope we're doing the right thing at this point. So,
and if people want to book to go there, but where do they go? Onto your website?
Yeah, well, Botanica Wines, there's a link to Sugarbird Manor, but sugarbirdmanor.co.za.
There we go. Fantastic views, amazing views. It's some of the most beautiful views in the Cape.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And great art. You have fantastic taste in art. You told us that, you loved art as a kid. And I think you paint now, don't you? Do paint and sculpt a little bit in your spare time?
I've been painting and drawing. I actually went to Sweden for 2 weeks and did a 2-week, charcoal and oil painting workshop. And I'm going to do it again next summer, different place. But just to get away and do nothing except stuff for myself, not to try to sell wine or,
And I think your sensibility comes across, your love of art, in your labels, because if they haven't seen the labels, they're beautiful. All your labels are great. And even the kind of the Flower Girl ranges, they're really fun and funky, aren't they?
Yes.
Are they your designs, or are you just telling somebody else to do it?
No, I actually, all the Flower Girl labels come from artists that I find on Instagram. And when you contact them, they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, what would you? I'd be honored if I could have your art on my label. And so that's how it usually goes. And
you pay them in wine?
No, I pay them real cash money, usually by PayPal.
Listen, it's been fantastic talking to you. I think it's amazing what you've achieved, and it's you make it sound as if it's all just kind of happened by accident, but there's an enormous amount of hard work behind this. I know you well, and I've enjoyed watching your journey and these incredible wines that you're making. Who would have guessed, really, don't you think? Looking back, when you did that little viticulture course, UC Davis every weekend, you'd be where you are now.
Actually, no. No, I can't even believe, actually, I've been here over 15 years now, and I can't believe that I've done it, actually, still. It's still like, pinch me. Am I really here?
Well, you are, and you've made an enormous success of it. Ginny, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us on Cork Talk. Cheers.
Thanks.
What a truly inspiring story. It just shows that you're never too old to start growing grapes and making wine. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is the highly entertaining German wine merchant Hendrik Thoma from Wein am Limit. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @timatkin and on Instagram @timatkinmw. See you next week.